Today we're going to take a look at how to boost the amp models in the Nux MG-30. Recently I was posting some videos about my new Nux MG-30, which is a small budget modeling unit with kick-ass effects quality, and also the amps sound great. Not all of them, but I think currently they're working at some of the amp models. But there are some models which are really convincing in my opinion. And yeah, compared to the price, it's I think a unique unit in that price range, offering this quality. There were maybe other competitors like maybe the Valeton GP200, which I also own and I compared, which is somehow similar, but if you compare only the effects quality, it's yeah, way another level in the Nux. Anyway. But what I discovered, and also I heard many of you discovered, is that some of the amp models, they seem to have clipping issues or are a little bit difficult to dial in, at least at higher gain settings. And I don't know if that is how the amps are supposed to work. But anyway, I got some great results, and I would like to show you the secrets which I use always to dial in a tight rhythm tone, tight as your anus. That is my anus. So I opened up the Nux MG-30 editor for you here. And as you can see, this is my patch with the Marshall DSL model. And yeah, currently I'm using a scene where I have the modulation effects, stereo chorus, and the delay engaged, which I like pretty much for soloing. Scene 2 is only the delay engaged, and scene 1 is only the reverb engaged. So this would be my rhythm tone, at least for playing at home. And with all of these modeling units, I'm dialing in my favorite tone, which is kind of like an 80s rock tone, high gain tone. Not that harsh in the upper mid range, like the modern metal tone, because I found these sounds to be not the best sounds for flute leads. They may be good for chugging, but anyway. So this would be my patch, which I would use most of the time. And as you can see here, these are the amp settings. I raised the bias quite high, but it's okay. It's working, I think. No unwanted flubbiness. What the bias does is, of course, it has something to do with maybe the power which or how hot you run the power amp tubes. But as a result, you get a little bit more mid-focus tone if you raise the bias, at least with most of these amps. And as I found out with this third-party IR which I use, I want to raise the overall mids a little bit, which leads me to another point. This thing has EQs, which you can use after the amp. But what I like to do is I use an EQ in front of the amp to boost the signal and to cut highs and lows. That is basically something which I always call a pre-gain equalisation, which is very important. In my opinion, it's the key to a tight high gain tone. Please check out my video about that. I made a video a couple of years ago where I was explaining in detail, but the thing is, you have to be aware what an EQ does in front of the distortion stage and what an EQ does after the distortion stage. Basically, after the distortion stage or after the amp, you are using the EQ for your overall tone shaping. But in front of the amp, it's more or less a tool for boosting your amp. So usually many people like to use some kind of fixed EQ curves. For example, the Ivana's, what is it, Maxon, I don't know, OD Tube Screamer, whatever, the green pedal, which has kind of a similar curve like I dialed in here. So it's basically raising a small bandwidth within the mids around maybe 700 or 800 hertz and cutting highs and lows. So it's boosting maybe only these mid frequencies. That results in more saturation in your amp, but it doesn't result in flubbiness or harshness, because these lows and highs, they're cut off in the pedal. And if you use an parametric EQ or even a graphic EQ, you are way more flexible. Because if you are using a pedal and maybe you have only a tone control and you have a distinct curve which is implemented in the pedal. And I found out that with some pedals I got some great results here, but I will show you one in a second. But if you use the parametric EQ, it's way more powerful. And as you can see here, I'm using my Harley Benton Fusion guitar with Roswell pickups. These pickups, they are known for being a little bit harsh in the top end. So always I like to use at least a pedal in front of the amp to cut these highs, or even better parametric EQ, which I did here. And that is the secret for my tight rhythm tone. If I turn it off, you can immediately hear the flubbiness in the bass. Also, it sounds maybe a little bit harsh. I don't know how it translates in YouTube, but if I turn it on, first thing I notice is no flubbiness. Also, not that harsh in the top end, and of course more saturation because you're pushing the mids. And of course you have to play around with the bands of frequencies here, and also with the levels to get the desired result. And it depends on the guitar you're using, and also depends on the amp settings you're using. So this is what I ended up with. You have here only these three, well, it's a shelving filter, the red, you see the red curve here. It's currently I was cutting the lows, or at least not cutting completely, but reducing the lows here around maybe 180 hertz or something. The center, of course, it starts a little bit earlier here. And also with this curve here, the highs. As you can see, I'm reducing highs drastically, but I'm also boosting the mids here in a rather wide range. So the resulting curve is the yellow one here. So this is, for those of you who are not familiar with parametric EQs, this curve here is the peak. It's working in a peak function, so that you can create like these bumps or also holes, and these, the red and the violet curves, they are acting as shelving functions. So basically they reducing or enhancing all the frequencies above or below this frequency here. So the result is this curve, and always I end up with a curve like that. I'd recommend to start boosting your guitar signal maybe around 800 hertz, so it's just right in the middle of the mids. And if you want to have more, maybe more punch, or more like what a Seymour Duncan SH4 pickup does, you should maybe raise around 1.6K So we have something like that. Suddenly you have this upper mid-range punch that the Seymour Duncan would give you. But with this amp setting it's a little bit too much, so I ended up here at the setting around maybe 800 Hz. If you want to have more like a Les Paul style sound, you should maybe raise around 400 Hz. But this would be way too much for my taste, at least with this guitar. And also, you have to think about how much you should raise it. So this depends on the output of your guitar. And that brings me back to the point with the bias here. Unfortunately, if you use the EQ in front of the amp, you don't have another EQ after the amp for tone shaping. So what you have is this bass, middle, treble presence control in the amp section, but that is tailored to a specific frequencies, like the amp has, and yeah, it's not. In this case, it's not addressing my desired frequencies, so to speak. That is also the case with the real amp. But anyway, so I wanted to use the to raise the overall mids, and if I use the mids knob here, it's creating some kind of a honk. So it's maybe a little bit of a short or small bandwidth, which is also the case in the rear Marshall amps. So I use the bias for this. Also, if you do this trick here with the raising the mids maybe around 800 Hz, sometimes it can result in a very honky tone, so usually people dial that out after the amp. And the best example for this is the Mesa Mark series, where you have the bass, middle, treble control acting pre-gain, so they're basically the boost section of the amp. It's not working like in any other or most of the other amps, you know, like a post-gain tone control. It's just a control for boosting your amp. And the post-gain, so the tone shaping, is done with this 5-band Mesa 5-band graphic EQ after the amp. And that is the result you see very often if people are using Mark amps with high gain tones. They cranking maybe the mids or the treble frequencies, reducing the bass, because boosting the bass would result in flubbiness. But with the 5-band EQ, they're dialing out this honkiness again with the famous V shape. But you cannot do this here because you have only one parametric EQ here. So that would be my wish, if they would yeah, maybe add another here, or at least the possibility to use two EQs. Because in my opinion it's very important to use these EQs maybe in front of the amp and also after the amp. Then you get maximum flexibility. And also what I would like to have is low and high cut, which would be very useful. I like the result here, it's fine, but low cuts and high cuts are very useful and I think in every block. And also I think they're reducing the amount of processing data. By the way, with the mouse wheel here you can adjust the slope, which I found out just now. So we can also play around with that a little bit. Wow, that's even better, I think. So can hear immediately honkiness. So yeah, let's save it. And I definitely recommend to play around with this pre-gain equalization. Another thing which I found out sounds great is the Nux steel singer pedal here. It has more of this upper mid-range punch for maybe chugging. Yeah, let's play a little bit of lead here. So this pedal is the one which led to the best results when using the pedal in this unit. Maybe it's easily overlooked because it's not that famous, I think. I don't know which pedal it's imitating, but it sounds great. Compared to the Tube Screamer model, which has more more output. Might be a little bit too much, which it sounds also decent. Maybe this, by using the filter in that setting, it's maybe cutting a little bit of the low mids. Compared to the EQ, sounds also great. So what else do we have? Well, let's check out maybe some other presets. Here I use the 6505 or 5150 model. Let's try to adjust it a little bit. What would we do? Usually we would do the same thing here like we did before. Boosting a little bit wider range. maybe it doesn't have enough output here for boosting it, but the thing with this amp model is if you crank the gain here, it doesn't work that well. Maybe they are reworking this amp model, but we can try maybe to use this EQ, which is a little bit difficult to use. But anyway, let's try to boost the mids here. This amp model, it sounds full and rich. Really, the only thing which is a little bit annoying is that you cannot crank the gain. Otherwise, it's kick-ass. Let's check out how this sounds with the steel singer pedal. Seems to get floppy in the bass, so let's compare it to the EQ. Sounds nice. What do we have? DSL shred. That is, as far as I remember, just the steel singer with a little bit of another. Ah, we have here the recto. Let me see. Here. I'm also using the steel singer. It's a little bit harsh in the top end. This amp model sounds also great. I like it because it doesn't have this unnecessary maybe punch around the higher mids, which the 6505 has. So you can get really fluid lead tones. There's lots of low end, but it doesn't get floppy. It's tight. Yeah, so as far as I remember, I also used this in my Mooer Ge300. It's a great amp. I've never played the real amp model, but the real amp, unfortunately. But it's a very good model here in this unit. As you can see here, nothing wrong with this and the steel singer, so this combination. So yeah, maybe that is one advice. Try out this steel singer pedal, and if you cannot get results with that, then just use the Paramagic EQ. Then you're way more flexible. Or if you know what you want, you can also start with using the Paramagic EQ. Just dial in exactly which sound you want to get with your guitar and amp combination. So yeah, that is something which usually I do with all of my modelers, just trying to boost the amp that it stays tight. But yeah, if I cannot get desired result with the pedal, I'm using the Paramagic EQ, and I can recommend it. It's a key to the tight rhythm tone and to anything which you need live. So yeah, I hope this video helps you a little bit to clarify how to use this pre-gain distortion. And yeah, subscribe to my channel, post your comments below, and goodbye.